Congresswoman Omar, I'm going to ask you a simple question. If the United States and Somalia went to war, hypothetically, which side would you want to win? Speaker Mike Johnson's voice cut through the House Ethics Committee hearing room like a blade. Calm, measured, clinical. The voice of a constitutional lawyer who'd spent 6 months building a case and knew exactly what he was about to do. Silence. Complete suffocating silence. Representative Ilhan Omar sat at the witness table, her lawyer beside her folders stacked in front of them. She'd been answering questions for 6 hours, deflecting, explaining, defending. But this question was different. This question had no good answer, and everyone in that room knew it. The silence stretched. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The C-SPAN cameras captured every moment. Every micro-expression on her face, the way her eyes darted to her lawyer, the way her hands gripped the edge of the table, the way she opened her mouth and then closed it without speaking. 40 seconds, 50 seconds, a full minute. It was the longest silence in congressional hearing history, and it was devastating. The hearing room was packed, every seat filled, press gallery overflowing, other members of Congress standing in the back because there were no chairs left. Everyone had known this hearing would be significant. Speaker Johnson didn't personally conduct hearings unless they mattered. But nobody had expected this. Nobody had expected the quiet, methodical destruction of a sitting congresswoman in real time. Johnson sat at the head of the committee table, his hands folded on top of a thick binder. Behind him were poster boards covered with charts, timelines, and photographs. To his right, the committee's chief counsel and investigators. To his left, more members of the Ethics Committee, all Republicans, because Democrats had boycotted calling this a political hit job. Their empty chairs just made the hearing look more serious, more judicial, less political theater, more prosecution. Omar wore a bright turquoise hijab and a dark blazer. She'd dressed for television for the clip that would go viral. She'd thought she'd be the hero of this story, the Muslim congresswoman standing up to Republican persecution. She'd survived worse attacks, been called a terrorist, had death threats, been accused of anti-Semitism. Each time she'd emerged stronger, more defiant, more popular with her base. But this was different. This wasn't tweets or speeches or cable news shouting matches. This was evidence, documents, bank records, phone transcripts, witnesses, 6 months of investigation distilled into an airtight case. Johnson finally broke the silence. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Let me rephrase to make it even simpler. You took an oath when you became a citizen. You renounced all allegiance to Somalia. You swore allegiance only to the United States. Did you mean that oath, or were you lying? Omar's lawyer, David Brennan, expensive D.C. attorney in a suit that probably cost $5,000, leaned over and whispered urgently in her ear. She shook her head slightly, whispered back. The microphones caught murmurs, but not words. Johnson waited, patient. He had all day. He had all the evidence. He could wait. Finally, Omar spoke. Her voice came out strained, defensive. That's a loaded question that doesn't... It's only loaded if you can't answer it honestly, Johnson interrupted, not rudely, just factually. Every American in this room knows the answer immediately. We'd want America to win. Why can't you say that? More silence. Omar looked trapped, cornered. Johnson leaned forward slightly. The fact that you can't answer that you won't answer tells us everything we need to know. You can't say America because everyone in this room has just seen 6 hours of evidence showing you've been working for Somalia's interests, coordinating with their government, taking their money, voting exactly as they want you to vote. But you can't say Somalia either, because that would be admitting you lied in your citizenship oath and you're serving in Congress under false pretenses. He paused. Let that land. So you say nothing, which is itself an answer. Omar stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice shook with anger. This is a witch hunt. This is Islamophobia, disguised as oversight. You're persecuting me because I'm a black Muslim woman who dares to speak truth to power. Johnson's expression didn't change. Sit down, Congresswoman. I will not sit down. His voice was sharp, now cutting. This has nothing to do with your religion or your race. This has to do with your actions, with documented evidence of foreign agent activity, with your refusal to register under FARA, with money you received from foreign government sources, with phone calls where you coordinated with foreign officials on how to undermine U.S. policy. Sit down. She sat because she had no choice, because the sergeant-at-arms was standing by the door, because her lawyer was pulling on her sleeve. Johnson picked up a document from his binder. Let me show everyone what we found. This is a phone transcript, NSA intercept from March of this year. You're talking to Somalia's foreign minister, and you say, I'm reading your exact words. I will always prioritize Somalia's interests. That's my first loyalty. America is just where I work. He looked up. Let that quote hang in the air. America is just where I work. Not your country. Not your home. Not the nation you swore an oath to. Just where you work. Like a job. Like you're a foreign agent who happens to have a congressional office and a security clearance. The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, people leaning forward, press typing furiously. Someone in the gallery shouted, "Traitor!" before being gled quiet. Johnson raised his voice slightly. Over the next hour, I'm going to show this committee and the American people exactly what Representative Omar has been doing for the past 4 years. Who's been funding her, who she's been coordinating with, what she's been saying in private versus what she says in public. And then we'll see if she can answer that simple question. Where does your loyalty lie? He looked directly at Omar. But I think we already know the answer. To understand how we got here, how the third-ranking Muslim in Congress ended up in a House hearing room, unable to say she'd want America to win a war, you have to go back 8 hours earlier. When Ilhan Omar walked into this building, thinking she'd survived this like she'd survived everything else, when she had no idea that Mike Johnson had built not a political attack, but a legal case, when she still thought she was untouchable. 8 hours earlier, Representative Ilhan Omar sat in her Longworth office building suite reviewing talking points with her lawyer and chief of staff. It was just after 8:00 a.m. The hearing started at 10:00. She had 2 hours to prepare for what she thought would be a routine political harassment session. They have nothing, Omar said, scrolling through her phone, checking Twitter reactions to news of the hearing. Her supporters were already flooding the zone, hashtags defending her, tweets calling it Islamophobia, the usual playbook. Mike Johnson has been investigating me for 6 months. If they had anything real, we'd already know. This is just red meat for the MAGA base. David Brennan, her lawyer, sat across from her, reviewing a thick folder of anticipated questions and prepared answers. He'd been through dozens of these hearings, knew how they worked. The subpoena is broad. FARA compliance, communications with foreign officials, campaign finance disclosures, standard fishing expedition. We stonewall on anything sensitive, invoke privileges where applicable, and this dies in committee. The Democrats are boycotting, which means there's no quorum for formal action. This is theater. Her chief of staff, Marcus Osman, flipped through printed-out press releases, ready to go. Media strategy is set. The second they go after you on Somalia, we frame it as attacking your advocacy for refugees and immigrants. If they bring up money, all contributions were properly disclosed per FEC rules. If they question your foreign policy positions, First Amendment, you have every right to criticize U.S. imperialism. Omar nodded, feeling more confident. She'd been through worse than Mike Johnson. She'd survived Trump calling her anti-American, survived McCarthy threatening to strip her committee assignments, survived countless death threats and protest. Each attack had made her stronger, made her base more devoted, made her a national figure in progressive politics. Remember, Brennan said, you don't have to answer most of their questions. If something feels like a trap, defer to me. I'll invoke attorney-client privilege or Fifth Amendment if necessary. They can't compel you to incriminate yourself. I'm not worried about incriminating myself, Omar said. I haven't done anything wrong. I've been helping my constituents, standing up for what's right. They're going to try to criminalize normal congressional work. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that while she'd been building her national profile and fighting public battles, Mike Johnson had been quietly building something very different. Not a political attack, a prosecutorial case. 6 months of investigation, subpoenas, document requests, witness interviews, NSA intercepts obtained through proper FISA warrants, financial records traced through multiple banks and countries. 3 blocks away in the Speaker's office in the Capitol, Mike Johnson sat at his desk going through the final briefing book one more time. He was meticulous by nature, had been a constitutional lawyer before entering politics, taught law, argued cases. He approached this hearing the way he'd approach a trial. His chief counsel, Tom Emerson, former assistant U.S. attorney who'd prosecuted corruption cases, sat across from him. We're ready. Everything's documented, every claim sourced, every piece of evidence that would hold up in federal court. Johnson flipped through tabs in the binder. Red for financial evidence, blue for communications intercepts, green for voting records, yellow for witness statements. Walk me through it one more time. I want to make sure the sequencing is right. Emerson pulled out his own outline. Opening. We establish what FARA is and why it exists. Foreign Agents Registration Act requires anyone acting on behalf of a foreign government to register. It's not complicated. If you're lobbying for a foreign power, you register. She didn't register. That's a felony. Phase 1. The money. We show that her campaigns and affiliated PACs received approximately $1.3 million from sources with direct ties to the Somali government. Not properly disclosed, shell organizations, pass-through entities, classic money laundering structure, campaign finance violations at minimum, potentially corruption. Johnson made a note. We need to be careful here. Some of those donors are Somali Americans who are U.S. citizens. We're not accusing them. We're showing the money ultimately came from foreign sources. Exactly. We've traced the funding. The organizations that donated are funded by Somali government-controlled entities. We have the bank records, Emerson continued. Phase 2. The communications. NSA has intercepted 43 calls or electronic communications between her and Somali government officials over the past 4 years. We can't use all of them. Some are too classified, but we have a dozen that have been declassified specifically for this hearing. They show her coordinating with Somalia's government on pending legislation, sharing information from classified briefings, promising to advocate for their positions. Phase 3. The voting record, simple and devastating. 23 votes in Congress related to Somalia or U.S.-Somalia relations. She voted against U.S. interests, 23 times out of 23. 100% alignment with what Somalia's government wanted. And every vote came within 2 weeks of her communicating with Somali officials. Pattern shows coordination. Johnson nodded. That's the key. Any one thing she can explain away. But the pattern is undeniable. Phase 4. The witnesses. We have 3 Somali American constituents from her district willing to testify. All registered Democrats, all voted for her initially, all now willing to say publicly that she told them privately her loyalty is to Somalia first. One of them recorded her saying it. Johnson looked up sharply. The recording is clean, admissible. Single-party consent state. Minnesota allows recording with one party's knowledge. The constituent recorded her own conversation with Omar. It's legal and it's devastating. Omar's voice saying, "You'll always be Somali in your heart. That's where your loyalty should be." Phase 5. The question. After we've presented all this evidence, we ask her directly, which country would you want to win? It's a trap, but a fair one. If she says America, we play the intercept where she says her first loyalty is to Somalia. If she says Somalia, she's admitted she lied in her citizenship oath. If she refuses to answer, that's its own answer. Johnson sat back. What if she takes the 5th? Even better. Congresswoman refuses to state whether she'd want America to win. That's the headline. That's the clip that plays forever. They reviewed potential defenses. Omar would claim Islamophobia. They had a response. This is about actions, not religion. We never mention her faith unless she brings it up. Omar would claim she was helping constituents with consular services. They had evidence showing it went far beyond that. Omar would say this was political persecution. They'd let the evidence speak for itself. Johnson's communications director entered with the media plan. C-SPAN is carrying it live. Our rapid response team is ready to clip key moments immediately. We've got 5 different legal scholars, 3 conservative, 2 liberal, ready to do interviews about FARA requirements and why they matter. We've got the 3 Somali American witnesses ready for media hits after they testify. This isn't just a hearing. It's a narrative rollout. Johnson felt a twinge of something. Not quite regret, but awareness. What he was about to do would end a congressional career, would possibly result in criminal prosecution, would destroy someone's life. He thought about whether he was doing this for the right reasons. Then he thought about the evidence, the phone calls where she coordinated with a foreign government, the money from foreign sources, the votes that consistently harmed U.S. interests, the security briefings she'd attended and then shared information from. This wasn't political persecution. This was accountability for actions that would get anyone else arrested. Tone is everything, Johnson said. I'm not attacking her personally. I'm not questioning her faith or her background. I'm presenting evidence of specific actions that violate federal law. Clinical, professional, prosecutorial. Let the facts speak. At 9:30 a.m., both sides moved toward the hearing room. Omar walked through the Capitol surrounded by supporters, members of the squad, AOC Rashida Ayanna Presley flanking her in solidarity. Cameras everywhere. She stopped for a quick statement to the press. This hearing is a political witch hunt designed to silence a black Muslim woman who speaks truth to power. But I will not be silenced. I will not be intimidated. And I will continue fighting for my constituents and for justice. She looked strong, defiant, ready for battle. Johnson entered through a side door, avoiding cameras, carrying his binder, looking like a lawyer heading to court. No performance, no press conference, just preparation. The hearing room filled quickly, every seat taken, press gallery packed. Gallery seats filled with Omar supporters wearing "We Stand with Ilhan" buttons, mixed with critics holding signs about accountability and law. Capitol Police everywhere, anticipating disruption. At exactly 10 a.m., Johnson gave the hearing to order. The House Committee on Ethics will come to order. We are here today to investigate potential violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act and related federal laws by Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota's 5th Congressional District. His voice was formal, procedural. This wasn't political theater. This was official business. Congresswoman Omar, you have been subpoenaed to testify. You have the right to counsel, which I see you've exercised. You have the right to make an opening statement. You have the right to refuse to answer questions, though the committee may draw appropriate inferences from such refusal. Do you understand these rights? Omar nodded. I do. Would you like to make an opening statement? She stood. She'd prepared for this moment, the speech that would go viral, the defiant stand against persecution. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. She looked directly at the cameras. I want to start by saying this hearing is a disgrace. It's political persecution disguised as oversight, as I'm being targeted because I'm a black Muslim woman who speaks truth to power, because I criticize U.S. foreign policy, because I stand with refugees and immigrants, because I dare to ask why we spend billions on weapons instead of health care and education. She was hitting her stride now, voice strong. I came to this country as a refugee fleeing war. I lived in a camp. I came to America with nothing. I learned English. I became a citizen. I worked hard. I served my community. And I was elected to Congress to represent my constituents. Everything I have done, everything has been in service of my constituents, helping Somali Americans navigate immigration issues, advocating for policies that help refugees and displaced people, speaking out against U.S. interventions that destabilize other countries. That's not being a foreign agent. That's being a representative. Her supporters in the gallery began applauding. Johnson let it go on for a few seconds, then gave them quiet. Order. We will have order, or I will clear the gallery. Omar continued. This committee has been investigating me for 6 months based on conspiracy theories promoted by right-wing media. They have twisted normal congressional work into something sinister. They have taken my advocacy for human rights and called it foreign influence. They have used my Muslim faith and my black identity against me. She looked directly at Johnson. I will not be silenced. I will not apologize for who I am or what I believe, and I will continue fighting for justice no matter how many hearings you hold. She sat down. Her supporters applauded again until Johnson gave them quiet with a warning. She looked confident, pleased with herself. She'd delivered the speech, set the narrative. Now it was just a matter of getting through the hearing with that narrative intact. Johnson let the moment settle, then opened his binder. Thank you for that statement, Congresswoman. Now, let's look at the evidence. And with those words, Omar's carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. Johnson pulled out the first set of documents, slid copies to the committee members and to Omar's lawyer. Let's start with campaign finance. Congresswoman, your campaigns and affiliated PACs have raised approximately $87 million since you first ran for Congress in 2018. Does that sound accurate? Omar glanced at her lawyer, who nodded slightly. I don't have exact numbers in front of me, but that's approximately correct. Of that $8.7 million, approximately $1.3 million came from sources with direct ties to the Somali government or Somali government-controlled entities. Were you aware of that? Her lawyer started to speak, but Omar cut him off. All of my campaign contributions were properly vetted and disclosed according to FEC regulations. That wasn't my question, Johnson interrupted gently. Were you aware that significant portions of your funding came from Somali government-linked sources, yes or no? Pause. I received donations from many sources, including Somali American community organizations. Let me be specific. Johnson pulled up a document on the screen behind him, large enough for everyone to see. The Somali American Leadership Council donated $380,000 to your campaigns across 3 election cycles. That's the single largest organizational donor to your campaigns. Correct. That's a legitimate American organization. It's incorporated in America, yes, but let's talk about where its money comes from. Johnson clicked to the next slide, a flowchart showing money movement. The Somali American Leadership Council receives 87% of its funding from the Somali Commercial Bank. The bank is headquartered in Mogadishu. Its chairman is Abdi Hassan Mahdi, who is the brother of Somalia's finance minister. The bank is effectively controlled by individuals closely tied to Somalia's government. He let that sink in. So when the Somali American Leadership Council donates to your campaign, where is that money really coming from? Omar's lawyer leaned forward. Mr. Speaker, the organization is a registered 501c4 in the United States. My client followed all FEC disclosure requirements. Did she disclose that the organization was funded by a Somali government-controlled bank? Did she disclose the foreign source of the funds? Silence. Johnson pulled out more documents. Let me show you something else. This is from the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. They track money laundering. They flagged the Somali American Leadership Council 2 years ago because of unusual money flows from Somalia. Large wire transfers from Mogadishu timed to coincide with U.S. election cycles. He showed the timeline. June 2020, $150,000 wired from Mogadishu to the council. 2 weeks later, $75,000 donated to your campaign. October 2022, $100,000 from Mogadishu. 3 weeks later, $100,000 to your campaign. The pattern repeats through 2022 and 2024. This isn't a grassroots American organization supporting your campaign. This is foreign money being laundered through a U.S. entity to fund your campaigns. That's illegal. Omar tried to respond. I had no knowledge of the internal funding sources. You met with Abdi Hassan Mahdi 6 times during your first campaign. He hosted a fundraiser for you in Minneapolis, where he was the guest of honor. Multiple witnesses heard him introduce you as our voice in Congress and the representative for all Somalis here and in the homeland. You're telling me you didn't know he was connected to Somalia's government? No good answer. Johnson moved on. The Horn of Africa Development Association donated $220,000 across your campaigns, also funded primarily by Somali government sources. The East African Community Foundation donated $180,000. Same funding structure. The Mogadishu Business Alliance donated $140,000, funded by businesses owned by individuals with direct ties to Somalia's government. He showed a chart. All told, we've traced $1.3 million in campaign donations to foreign sources. That's 15% of everything you've raised. And you expect us to believe you had no idea? Her lawyer objected. These are American organizations making legal donations. They're pass-throughs, shell organizations. The money originates in Somalia, gets laundered through U.S. entities, and ends up in her campaign. That's how foreign governments circumvent campaign finance law, and she knew it. Johnson pulled out another folder. Let's talk about your husband, Ahmed Hirsi. He runs a company called Sahan Services Group. According to your financial disclosures, that company has received $280,000 in consulting fees from various Somali businesses over the past 4 years. What services does his company provide? Omar's face tightened. My husband's business is separate from my congressional work. He works from your house. You file joint tax returns. His income is your income. So I'll ask again, what did his company do to earn $280,000 from businesses in Somalia? Her lawyer whispered to her. She shook her head slightly. Johnson didn't wait. Let me tell you what our investigators found. Sahan Services Group has no website, no LinkedIn profile, no other clients we can identify besides these Somali businesses, no employees other than your husband. The consulting is undefined. No work product, no deliverables, no contracts specifying services. He showed bank records. But what we do have is a pattern. Every payment to his company came within 2 weeks of you voting on Somalia-related legislation. Every single payment. He displayed a timeline, 2 columns. Left side, payments to Sahan Services Group. Right side, your votes on Somalia-related bills. The correlation was perfect. Payment on March 15, 2022. Vote on Somalia sanctions on March 28, 2022. Payment on June 3, 2022. Vote on aid conditions on June 14, 2022. Over and over. This isn't consulting income. These are payments for your votes. This is corruption. The room erupted. Gasps, shouting from the gallery. Johnson gave for order. We will have order, or I will clear this room. Omar stood up, her voice shaking. This is outrageous speculation based on coincidence. Sit down, Congresswoman. Johnson's voice was sharp. 8 payments, 8 votes. Perfect timing. That's not coincidence. That's evidence. And we're just getting started. Johnson opened a blue folder. Let's talk about your communications with Somali government officials. How many times would you estimate you've spoken with members of Somalia's government since taking office in 2019? Omar looked wary now. I don't keep account. As part of my work helping constituents with immigration and consular issues, the FBI has a count. You've had documented contact with Somali government officials 127 times in the past 4 years. Phone calls, in-person meetings, encrypted messaging, 127 times. That's more contact than most State Department officials working on Somalia policy. He paused. Now, most of those communications are probably routine, helping a constituent with a visa issue, following up on a passport problem. That's normal congressional work. But 43 of those communications were different. 43 times you discussed U.S. policy towards Somalia pending congressional votes, information from classified briefings or strategic matters, and we have transcripts. Omar's lawyer sat up straighter. Mr. Speaker, I object to these transcripts. They were obtained legally under FISA warrants. The FBI was monitoring Somali government communications as part of ongoing terrorism investigations, Al-Shabaab financing, weapons trafficking. Your client's name kept appearing in those communications. So, the FBI obtained a warrant from the FISA court to monitor her communications with foreign government officials. Johnson pulled out a transcript. This is from March 14, 2025. You're speaking with Somalia's Foreign Minister, Abdullahi Hassan. You say, and I quote, "The sanctions bill is coming up for a vote next week. I've been talking with progressive members, Ocasio-Cortez, and a few others. We're working to either block it or at least strip the provisions targeting your officials. I think we can get about 15 votes. It's going to take some convincing, but I think we can do this." He looked up. You're coordinating with a foreign government on how to defeat U.S. legislation. That's not constituent services. That's lobbying for a foreign power. That's exactly what FARA is designed to prevent. Omar started to speak, but Johnson continued. Here's another one. April 2nd, 2025. You're speaking with Ambassador Omar Sharif, Somalia's ambassador to the United States. You say, I attended a classified briefing yesterday on regional security and counterterrorism operations. I obviously can't share classified details, but I can tell you that the U.S. is planning to increase drone operations and special forces activities in the southern provinces over the next few months. Your government should prepare accordingly. You should start messaging about civilian casualties now, before the operations begin. The room went silent, completely silent. Johnson's voice got harder. You attended a classified briefing. Then you called a foreign government official and told him about upcoming U.S. military operations. You gave them advanced warning so they could prepare. That's a violation of your security clearance. That's potentially espionage. Americans could have died because of what you told them. Omar's lawyer was on his feet. Mr. Speaker, this is highly prejudicial. It's her voice, her words, legally obtained. Would you like me to play the audio? He pressed a button. Omar's voice filled the room crystal clear, saying exactly what Johnson had read. The audio quality was professional. NSA intercept. Undeniable. Johnson turned off the audio. Let me share one more. This is my favorite. July 18, 2025. You're speaking again with Foreign Minister Hassan. He's thanking you for your help on various matters. And you respond, I want everyone to hear this very carefully. You say, of course, I will always prioritize Somalia's interests. That's my first loyalty. America is just where I work, where I have a platform. But my heart, my loyalty, that's with Somalia. That will never change. He let the quote hang in the air. Let everyone absorb it. America is just where I work. Not your country, not the nation you took an oath to serve, not the people you represent, just your workplace, just a platform. He looked directly at Omar. You're an elected representative of the United States Congress. You have a security clearance. You take classified briefings. You vote on legislation affecting national security. And you told a foreign official that your first loyalty is to his country, not to ours. Omar's face was flushed. Her hands gripped the table. That's taken completely out of context. Would you like me to play the full conversation? It's 9 minutes long. It doesn't get better. You spend 9 minutes discussing how to coordinate your congressional advocacy with Somalia's government priorities. The context makes it worse, not better. Johnson pulled out a green folder. Let's examine your voting record on Somalia-related issues. In the past 4 years, there have been 23 bills, resolutions, or amendments that Congress voted on related to Somalia. Foreign aid conditions, sanctions, arms sales to regional partners, human rights resolutions, 23 votes where Congress took a position on U.S. Somalia policy. How did you vote on those 23 bills? Omar knew where this was going. I voted according to my conscience and my understanding of what's best for the region. You voted against U.S. interests all 23 times, 100%. Not 22 out of 23, not 18 out of 23, all 23 times. Every single time there was a choice between supporting U.S. policy or supporting Somalia's government position, you sided with Somalia. He displayed the voting record on the screen, each vote listed with her position. Bill to condition U.S. aid on human rights improvements in Somalia. You voted no. Resolution condemning Somalia's imprisonment of journalists. You voted present. Sanctions on Somali officials linked to corruption. You voted no. Arms sailed to Kenya, which Somalia opposed because of border disputes. You voted no. Bill to increase funding for counterterrorism operations against al-Shabaab. You voted no. Resolution supporting democratic reforms in Somalia. You voted present. It goes on and on. Johnson looked up from the screen. 23 votes. 23 times you sided with Somalia's government over the United States. That's not a policy disagreement. That's not progressive foreign policy. That's allegiance to a foreign power. Omar tried to defend herself. I have principled objections to U.S. militarism and intervention. Then why do you only have those objections when it comes to Somalia? You've voted for military action in other contexts. You've supported aid to other countries without conditions. But when it comes to Somalia, 100% alignment with their government's position. He pulled out another chart. And here's what's really interesting. Every one of those 23 votes happened within 2 weeks of you meeting with Somali government officials. Every single one. The timeline showed it clearly. Call with Foreign Minister on March 10th. Vote on Somalia sanctions on March 22nd. Meeting with Ambassador on May 5th. Vote on aid conditions on May 16th. Perfect correlation. You talk to them. They tell you how they want you to vote. You vote that way. That's not representing your constituents. That's taking instructions from a foreign government. That's exactly what foreign agents do. Omar's lawyer stood. Mr. Speaker, you're drawing unwarranted conclusions from coincidental timing. 23 times. That's not coincidence. That's coordination. That's a pattern so clear that any federal prosecutor would take it to a jury. Johnson closed the folders in front of him. I want to shift now from documents to testimony. We have 3 witnesses who are constituents of Congresswoman Omar. All Somali Americans, all U.S. citizens, all people who voted for her, and all willing to testify about conversations they had with her, conversations about loyalty, about allegiance, about who she really serves. He nodded to the door. I'd like to call our first witness, Amina Hassan. Please, come forward. A woman in her early 40s entered. She wore a hijab and a modest dress. She looked nervous, but determined. She took her seat at the witness table, was sworn in, and gave her name for the record. Johnson spoke gently. Ms. Hassan, thank you for being here. I know this is difficult. Please tell the committee about yourself. Amina spoke in clear but accented English. My name is Amina Hassan. I am a U.S. citizen. I came to America from Somalia in 1996 as a refugee. I was 16 years old. I have lived in Minneapolis ever since. I work as a nurse at Hennepin County Medical Center. I am married. I have 3 children who were all born in America. And you live in Congresswoman Omar's district? Yes. The 5th district. Did you vote for her? Yes, in 2018 and in 2020. I was very proud when she was elected. She was like us, a refugee who made it. I thought she would represent our community well. I thought she would help us integrate into American society, help us succeed. Johnson nodded. What changed your mind about her? Amina took a breath. In 2020, there was a town hall meeting in Minneapolis, Cedar Riverside neighborhood. I attended because I wanted to ask about programs to help refugees integrate. English classes, job training, citizenship support, things to help us become American. What happened? I asked my question. I said that many refugees want to integrate, want to become fully American, but need support to do it. And she got angry. Amina's voice got stronger. She said we shouldn't have to assimilate, that we should keep our Somali identity and culture, that America needs to change to accommodate us, not the other way around. What was your reaction? I was confused. I came to America because I wanted to be American. I love Somalia. It's where I was born, but I chose to become American. I took the citizenship oath. I meant it. Johnson leaned forward. Did you speak with Congresswoman Omar after the event? Yes. I waited until most people had left. I approached her privately. I told her that I didn't come to America to stay Somali. I came to become American. And she, Amina paused, emotional now. She looked at me like I was a traitor. She said, "You can be American on paper, but you'll always be Somali in your heart. That's where your loyalty should be, to our people, to our homeland." Did anyone else hear this conversation? My husband was with me. He heard it too. And what did you think when she said that? Amina's voice cracked slightly. I thought she didn't understand what it means to be an American. Or maybe she understood and just didn't care. I came here as a refugee. I was given a chance at a new life. I love America. This is my home now. And she was telling me that wasn't good enough, that I should stay loyal to Somalia. Johnson pulled out his phone. Ms. Hassan, do you have any documentation of this conversation? Yes? She pulled out her own phone. After that conversation, I became suspicious of her. So, the next time I saw her at another event a few months later, I recorded our conversation. And what did she say in that conversation? Amina played the audio, Omar's voice unmistakable. You have to understand, Amina. We are Somali first. That doesn't change just because we have American passports. Our loyalty, our identity, our purpose, that's all tied to Somalia, to our people back home. America is just where we live now, but Somalia is who we are. The hearing room erupted, shouting, gasps. Johnson gave for order. Omar stood up. That recording was made without my knowledge. Minnesota is a one-party consent state, Johnson said. Ms. Hassan was a party to the conversation. The recording is legal. He called 2 more witnesses. Both Somali Americans, both with similar stories, both describing Omar telling them their true loyalty should be to Somalia, not America. One had a witness who corroborated the conversation. Another had written notes from immediately after their meeting with Omar documenting what she'd said. All 3 witnesses were asked the same final question. Do you believe Representative Omar's first loyalty is to the United States or to Somalia? All 3 gave the same answer. To Somalia, without question. After the witnesses finished, Johnson turned back to Omar. His voice was quiet now, serious. Congresswoman, let's talk about your oath of citizenship. You became a naturalized U.S. citizen in 2000. Do you remember the ceremony? Omar nodded stiffly. Of course. Do you remember the oath you took? The standard citizenship oath. Let me read it to you. Make sure we all understand what you swore. Johnson pulled out a document. This is the oath every naturalized citizen takes. You took this oath in Minneapolis on October 5, 2000. You raised your right hand and you said, he read slowly, clearly, I hereby declare, on oath, that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen. He looked up. You swore to absolutely and entirely renounce all allegiance to Somalia. Did you mean that? Of course I meant it. Then why did you tell the Somali foreign minister that your first loyalty is to Somalia? Why did you tell constituents they'll always be Somali in their hearts? Why did you tell Amina Hassan that Somalia is who we are, and America is just where we live. Those statements are the exact opposite of the oath you took." He continued reading the oath. "I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same." You swore to bear true faith and allegiance to the United States. Have you done that? I have. You've coordinated with a foreign government on how to defeat U.S. legislation. You've shared classified information with foreign officials. You've taken money from foreign government sources. You've voted against U.S. interests 100% of the time when they conflicted with Somalia's interests. That's not true faith and allegiance to the United States. That's the opposite. Johnson's voice got harder. The oath continues. I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. No mental reservation, no purpose of evasion. Did you take that oath freely, or did you have mental reservations? Did you think, I'll say these words, but I don't really mean them? Omar's lawyer objected. Mr. Speaker, you're asking her to speculate about her state of mind from 25 years ago. I'm asking if she lied, if she took an oath she never intended to keep, if she committed fraud to obtain U.S. citizenship. The room went silent because based on the evidence we've seen today, the money, the phone calls, the coordination, the votes, her own statements, it appears she never actually renounced her allegiance to Somalia. She never truly committed to serving only American interests. She took the oath, got the citizenship, ran for Congress, and has been serving Somalia's government the entire time. Johnson leaned forward. That's fraud, Congresswoman. That's grounds for revoking your citizenship. That's grounds for prosecution. And it's grounds for removing you from Congress. The hearing had been going for nearly 7 hours. Omar looked exhausted, trapped. Every defense had been shredded. Every explanation had been countered with evidence. The money trail was documented. The phone calls were recorded. The voting pattern was undeniable. The witnesses had testified under oath. Johnson had built a case that would hold up in any court. And now he was going to finish it. Congresswoman Omar, he said quietly, we've covered a lot of ground today, but I want to end where we began with a simple question. The most basic question of loyalty. He paused. Let the room settle. If the United States and Somalia went to war hypothetically, which side would you want to win? The question hung in the air. Simple, direct, devastating. Omar stared at him, looked at her lawyer, looked at her hands. The silence stretched 10 seconds, 20, 30. She couldn't say America because everyone had just seen 7 hours of evidence showing she'd been working for Somalia. The phone transcripts where she promised to prioritize Somalia's interests. The witnesses who testified she told them Somalia was their true loyalty. The votes where she sided with Somalia over America every single time. But she couldn't say Somalia either, because that would be admitting everything. Admitting she lied in her citizenship oath. Admitting she was serving a foreign power. Admitting treason on national television. So she said nothing. 40 seconds, 50, a full minute. Finally, she spoke. Her voice strained. That's an absurd hypothetical that doesn't reflect. It's not absurd, Johnson interrupted. It's the most basic question of loyalty. Every American knows the answer immediately. We'd want America to win always, no matter what. Why can't you say that? Because it's a loaded question designed to, it's only loaded if you can't answer it honestly. Johnson's voice was calm, but relentless. Let me make it even simpler. Do you believe your first loyalty is to the United States or to Somalia? Her lawyer leaned over, whispered urgently. She shook her head, whispered back. I'm not going to engage with this racist line of questioning. It's not racist to ask where your loyalty lies, Johnson said sharply. It's not racist to expect a member of Congress to put America first. It's basic. It's fundamental. It's essential. And the fact that you're calling the question racist tells me you can't answer it. He stood now, looking down at her. You've sat here for 7 hours. You've heard the evidence, the money from foreign sources, the coordination with foreign officials, the votes against U.S. interests, the classified information you shared. Your own words on tape saying your first loyalty is to Somalia. And now I'm asking you directly, which country do you serve? Which country has your loyalty? And you can't answer because everyone in this room knows the answer. Everyone watching at home knows the answer. You serve Somalia. Your loyalty is to Somalia. You've been a foreign agent operating inside Congress with a security clearance and a vote on U.S. policy. Omar stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly. Her voice shook with anger and desperation. This entire hearing is a sham, a witch hunt. You've turned normal congressional work into some kind of spy thriller. You've persecuted me because I'm Muslim, because I'm black, because I dare to criticize U.S. imperialism. Johnson's expression didn't change. Sit down, Congresswoman. I will not sit down. You've twisted everything. The money was from legitimate American organizations. The calls were constituent services. The votes were my policy positions. You're criminalizing my religion and my identity. Sit down, or I will have you removed from this hearing. You can't silence me. I represent— Johnson's voice cut through like a whip. Sergeant at arms. If the Congresswoman does not sit down, escort her from this hearing. Omar's lawyer grabbed her arm, pulled her down into her seat. She was breathing hard, furious, but trapped. Johnson sat back down. Let the record reflect that Representative Omar refuses to answer whether her first loyalty is to the United States. She refuses to answer whether she would want America to win in a conflict with Somalia. She deflects to claims of persecution and racism rather than addressing the evidence. He picked up a document. Based on the evidence presented in this hearing, this committee makes the following findings. 1. Representative Omar received approximately $1.3 million in campaign contributions from sources with direct ties to the Somali government. These sources were not properly disclosed. This constitutes campaign finance violations and potentially money laundering. 2. Representative Omar communicated with Somali government officials 127 times over 4 years, including 43 communications where she discussed U.S. policy, congressional votes, and classified information. She coordinated her congressional activities with a foreign government. This constitutes activity requiring registration under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. She did not register. That is a felony. 3. Representative Omar shared information derived from classified briefings with foreign officials. This constitutes a security clearance violation and potentially espionage. 4. Representative Omar voted against U.S. interests 100% of the time when those interests conflicted with Somalia's government positions. The pattern and timing of these votes, combined with her communications with Somali officials, demonstrates coordination with a foreign power. 5. Representative Omar made statements to constituents and to foreign officials, indicating her primary loyalty is to Somalia rather than to the United States. This contradicts her citizenship oath and her congressional oath of office. Johnson looked up. Based on these findings, this committee will be making several referrals. First, to the Department of Justice for prosecution under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, campaign finance laws, and laws regarding classified information. Second, To the House Ethics Committee for violations of House rules regarding outside income, conflicts of interest, and conduct unbecoming a member of Congress. Third, to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence for immediate revocation of Representative Omar's security clearance. Fourth, to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services for investigation of potential fraud in her citizenship application. Fifth, to the House of Representatives for consideration of expulsion under Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution. Each referral landed like a hammer blow. Omar sat frozen, the color draining from her face. Representative Omar, you are hereby suspended from all committee assignments pending the outcome of these investigations. Your security clearance is revoked effective immediately. You are prohibited from attending any classified briefings, and this committee recommends that the full House vote on your expulsion within 30 days. Omar found her voice. You can't do this. I just did. Johnson closed his binder. This hearing is adjourned. He stood. The other Republican committee members stood. They filed out. Omar sat at the witness table surrounded by her lawyer and staff, looking shell-shocked. The cameras captured every moment. Her supporters in the gallery were shouting, but it sounded distant. Defeated. She'd walked into this hearing thinking she could survive it, like she'd survived everything else. That she could play the victim, call it persecution, rally her base. But Johnson hadn't played politics. He'd prosecuted a case with evidence, with witnesses, with facts that couldn't be spun away. And now her career was over. The video clips spread instantly. Within minutes of the hearing adjourning, the key moments were on Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. The silence when she couldn't answer whether she'd want America to win. The recording of her saying, "America is just where I work." The witnesses testifying, she told them to stay loyal to Somalia. By evening, it was the only story, not just on conservative media everywhere. CNN's legal analyst said the Farah case looked strong. MSNBC's panel was divided but somber. Even progressive outlets couldn't defend the recordings of her own voice. The New York Times. Omar hearing reveals troubling foreign ties. Washington Post. Evidence of foreign coordination raises questions about Omar's loyalty. The Atlantic. When American citizenship isn't enough. Polling came quickly. 71% of Americans said members of Congress should unequivocally support America over other countries. 64% said Omar should resign. 58% supported investigating whether her citizenship was obtained fraudulently. Even in her district, approval dropped to 38%. Democratic leadership stayed silent for 48 hours, then released a tepid statement. These are serious allegations that must be investigated thoroughly through proper legal channels. Translation: she's on her own. Progressive squad members tried to defend her. AOC tweeted about Islamophobia. Tlaib called it a witch hunt, but the evidence was too strong. Even supporters couldn't explain away her own recorded voice, saying her loyalty was to Somalia. 3 weeks later, the House voted on expulsion. It takes a 2/3 majority. The vote was 307 to 118. 62 Democrats joined all Republicans. Omar became only the 6th House member ever expelled. The Department of Justice indicted her on 3 counts of violating FARA, 2 counts of campaign finance fraud, and 1 count of mishandling classified information. Trial set for the following year. USCIS opened an investigation into her citizenship. If she lied in her oath, it could be revoked. She could be denaturalized and deported. Minnesota's governor announced a special election for her seat. 6 candidates immediately declared. None of them wanted her endorsement. The 3 Somali-American witnesses who testified became community leaders. They started an organization, Somali Americans for American Values. Their message: "We came here to be American. We chose this country. Our loyalty is here." They held a press conference. "Ilhan Omar doesn't represent us. She represented Somalia. We came to America to escape corruption and violence, to build new lives, to be American. She betrayed that. She betrayed us." 6 months after the hearing, Omar sat in a Minneapolis apartment awaiting trial, her congressional career over, her citizenship in jeopardy, facing potential prison time. She gave one interview to a friendly outlet. "I was persecuted for my identity," she said, "for being Muslim, for being black, for daring to criticize U.S. foreign policy." But nobody was listening anymore because they'd all seen the evidence, heard the recordings, watched her unable to answer one simple question: would you want America to win? The lesson was simple and brutal. You can be born somewhere else. You can immigrate. You can become a citizen. You can even serve in Congress. But the oath you take to renounce all other allegiances to serve only America, that oath has to mean something. Ilhan Omar took that oath, and she broke it. Not accidentally, not unknowingly, deliberately, consistently, for years. She coordinated with the foreign government, took their money, voted as they wanted, shared classified information, told constituents their loyalty should be to another country, said on tape that America was just where she worked. And when she was finally held accountable, when Mike Johnson spent 6 months building an airtight case and presented it methodically, professionally, without rhetoric or hyperbole, she had no defense except to call it persecution. But you can't claim persecution when they have recordings of your voice, bank records of the money, witnesses under oath, a voting record that speaks for itself. You can't claim Islamophobia when the question isn't about your religion, but about your actions. You can't claim racism when Americans of all backgrounds expect the same thing from their representatives: loyalty to America. Ilhan Omar failed that test. Failed it repeatedly. Failed it so thoroughly that she couldn't even say she'd want America to win a war. And that's why her career ended in a hearing room with cameras rolling, with evidence stacked high, with one question she couldn't answer. Where does your loyalty lie? She never said America, and that told everyone everything they needed to know.